Hi guys, today we're going to talk about chemical formula, and it's also a follow-up on lesson from last lesson where we discussed atoms, elements and compounds. And we're also in this video going to discuss how to name compounds. So let's get started. Last lesson, how many different elements are in the compound NaOH? Well, if you remember, all we need to do is look for capital letters. So how many have we got? 1, 2, 3. 3 capital letters, 3 elements. That should be quite straightforward. Now, today's lesson, we're going to start off by looking at how to name compounds. And this is what you should have completed last lesson. You should have the chemical formula, you should have the types of elements in the formula, and how many of each you have. Now, this was an extension last lesson, but we're going to go through the answers for this, and I'm going to show you how to do it as well. The first thing you're going to need is a data sheet, which you can get from AQA. I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can get one of these. And it should look like this. And this tells you the positive ions and negative ions. You might not know what ions are yet, but don't worry about it. The key thing is the names. So what I want you to think about this as is this first column here being like the element's first name. And then the second bit here is that kind of like a last name. And we're going to put these two things together to get the overall name of the compound. So let's start with the first one. We've got NaCl here. So what elements is it made up of? So let's have a look at its first name, then its last name, and combine the two. So its first name, Na. So go down the list and look for Na. Well, here it is here. So its first name is sodium. What's its last name? So look at the second element. Well, it's Cl. So go down its last name, chloride. So we named that sodium chloride. Now, there's lots here to do, so we're going to go through each one, and they do get progressively harder, and I'll break it down as we go. So the first one, sodium chloride. Now the next one, MgO. Mg, look down the first name list. Where's Mg? Here. So its first name is magnesium, and O, what's its last name? Oxide. So we call that magnesium oxide. Now the next three are slightly different. We need to know a bit of extra information. We need to know these common acids. And sadly, you just have to learn these. You have to know that HCl means hydrochloric acid, H2SO4 is sulfuric acid, and HNO3 is nitric acid. So that whenever you see these types of things here, you just need to know and recognize those formulas and know the names. So we're going to ignore this one for the time being. We're going to ignore this one. Let's have a look at this one. Look at our list. Well, this one is sulfuric acid. The next one, if you learn it, you'll find out that it's hydrochloric acid. Now pause the video and have a guess using what you can see here about the different types of last names and also the acids that form. Can you think of what the name of this thing might be here? Pause the video, have a guess, and then we'll reveal the answer. Right, so I asked you to try and guess the name of this acid. It's got first name here, it's got hydrogens. We can't call it hydrogen. And it's got PO4 here, which isn't on our list. But we have got sulfate, carbonate. We've got things that look similar but definitely aren't the same. Now, this is called a phosphate group. And when you put this together, you might be tempted to call it hydrogen phosphate, which wouldn't be far wrong, but it's an acid, because I've told you it's an acid, and its real name is phosphoric acid. Now, please don't worry about this one. This is a really, really hard one, and you probably won't come up against this in your GCSEs. It's just there to try and stretch and challenge. Now, you've got these two at the bottom. I want you to have a go at these yourself, using what I've told you about looking at first names and last names. The last one here, you won't be able to do using that method, but I'm hoping you can recognize it anyway. All right, so pause the video, have a go, and we'll reveal the answers. Right, let's have a look at this one here. So it's first name. You've got this Ca here. Look down the first name column, Ca. So its first name is calcium. Now, you might be tempted to break this and this up into carbon and oxygen. Well, Is there a carbon on this list? No. Is there a carbon on this list? No. So we don't have the correct name to name this, so it definitely can't be carbon. So look for something else that's similar. So going down the last name list, can you see anything that is similar to what we are looking at? When you get to the bottom, you'll see this, CO3. The name for that is carbonate. So this compound here is called calcium carbonate. That's quite a tricky one, so make sure you go back through that if you don't understand it. This last one here, H2O, I'm hoping you recognise as being water. Now if you want to have a go at some more of those, I don't mind doing another lesson on it, but please put the comments in the bottom, and if I get enough then I'll do a video. So moving on to today's lesson then, chemical formula. This is about how to write equations using either symbols like we've looked at or words. To know how to write an equation though, you need to look at this slide here. It's really important that you remember that reactants are things that react together, and they always go on the left hand side of the arrow. Products are things that are made during a reaction, and they go on the right. Also, never ever use equals. You might be tempted to, but this isn't maths. It's not this add this equals this. We say goes to give or goes to make. We use an arrow instead. So make sure reactants go on the left. You use an arrow to separate reactants and products are things that are made go on the right. So let's look at putting this into practice. We've got an example here that says magnesium and oxygen react together to form magnesium oxide. So the first thing to do is to separate the products and reactants with an arrow. Remember, reactants on the left and products on the right. You need to look at the example now and decide what are you going to put on the product side, what are you going to put on the reactant side. And there's always a clue in the question. It says magnesium and oxygen react together to form magnesium oxide. So these two things here are what are reacting together. Magnesium and oxygen. The thing that's being formed is the compound magnesium oxide. And that goes on the right. You're going to have a go at some of these now. There's two here, so pause the video and then unpause it to reveal the answers. Right, so the first one says sodium and chlorine react to form sodium chloride. Again, start off with an arrow to separate the reactants and products, and then use the question to try and find some hints as to what you're going to put there. So it says sodium and chlorine react to form. So these are the two things that are reacting. Sodium and chlorine. And they are forming sodium chloride. Now the next one says copper sulfate and iron react together. So again, using the question as a sort of guide to help you do this, separate products and reactants with an arrow, and on the left you're going to have the reactants, copper sulfate and iron, and they're going to react to form iron sulfate and copper. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go the other way. We're going to try and construct a symbol formula from a word formula. This is slightly more tricky because obviously we're now going the other way, but if you use your data sheet, this should be fairly straightforward. So the first one is going to be fairly easy. We've looked at this quite a couple of times in this lesson already, and it's sodium chloride. If you use your data sheet and look down the first name column and the last name column, you'll be able to construct a formula for this compound. So sodium, the symbol for sodium is Na, and the symbol for chloride is Cl. So here's a couple for you to have a go at. Pause the video and then unpause for the answers. Right, copper oxide. Copper is Cu and oxide is O. Magnesium, Mg, and sulfate is SO, little 4. The 4 must be lowercase. You cannot, so that's correct, you cannot do this. Even if you know it should be lowercase, the examiner doesn't. So you need to really show this by doing the little 4 there. This last one might look confusing because you've got this 2 here, these Roman numerals. You'll find out in a couple more videos time what that 2 actually means. But if you look down the list, you should have seen this iron 2, and it has the same symbol as iron 3, Fe. Oxide again is just 0. So hopefully you got those right, and now we can move on to something a little more challenging. We're going to do this, but we're going to do this for whole equations. I'm going to give you the word equation, and you're going to change it into the symbol equation. So the first one, iron and sulfur form iron sulfide. We'll do this one together, and then I'll give you some to try yourself. So iron from the list is Fe, sulfur is S, and iron sulfide would be FeS. Now I want to direct you to the bottom here. Don't worry about trying to balance any numbers or add any symbols at this stage. I just want you to write in the symbols in the correct places. So there's a couple for you to do. And I do want to bring up something else before you have a go. It's this phrase here, have no fear of ice cold beer. Now some elements exist as pairs, and they're called diatomic elements. That means there's 2 of them. When you find them, there's only 2 together. So these elements can be found by looking at the pink letter that starts each of these words. So what element could H be? Well, that's going to be hydrogen. And hydrogen exists as H2. It's diatomic because it's a pair. N is nitrogen, N2. F is fluorine, F2. O is oxygen, O2. I is iodine, I2. Now this one you might think is carbon. It's not, it's chlorine, Cl2. And B, that's bromine, Br2. So you need to memorize those. That's another of those things in science where you've just got to know it. Hopefully this phrase, have no fear of ice cold beer, helps you memorize the types of elements which we find as diatomic. So now you know that, I'm going to leave that on the screen, and there's 2 for you to have a go at. So pause the video and then unpause for the answers. Right, the second one here, calcium. That has a symbol of Ca. Oxygen has a symbol of O, but hopefully you remembered that it's on our list here, it's diatomic. So that exists as a pair, as O2. When it reacts though with calcium, you have calcium oxide, CaO. And this is really important because look what I put at the bottom here. Don't worry about balancing formula or adding state symbols. I'm not bothered that there's 2 O's on the left and only 1 on the right. That doesn't bother me at this stage, and it shouldn't bother you. We'll look at that next video. So did you get the third one right then? Zinc is Zn. Chlorine, the symbol is Cl, but again it's on our list here. So it's Cl2. Arrow, zinc chloride, ZnCl. Okay, now it is important to point out that these 2 here, that one is correct. This one here, although it's correct in this lesson, we're going to look at this at the start of next lesson and see why that this isn't 100% correct. So I'm going to leave you now with some questions to have a go at, and then we'll look at the answers at the start of next lesson.